Okay, so the next film that we're going to be reviewing is Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, directed by Eliza Hittman. Jim, tell us a little bit about the film.
So the film centres on two young girls, basically, who live in rural... well, it's not too rural, but it's Pennsylvania. And basically, Autumn, played by Sidney Flanigan, finds herself pregnant after some build up to basically confirming this, and needs to pursue a abortion, which is not offered to her in her hometown, and you get some scenes basically showing the slightly lacking provisions that are offered instead. So instead, she takes off with her cousin Skylar, played by Talia, Ryder, to New York City in order to make use of the facilities across state lines. So it basically it follows them throughout that journey, really, from basically trying to do this under the radar without the awareness of their parents and the difficulties they encounter even when they get there, and basically all the hoops that they have to jump through and the difficulties that they face, mainly from men, is also a key part of this. It's kind of like the role or the lack thereof of men in this particular scenario. And it focuses on the two of them the whole time, couple of supporting characters, but that's what it does. It focuses on their journey from Pennsylvania, crossing state lines in order to try and get an abortion for this unwanted pregnancy.
And Mark, what did you think?
Yeah, I thought this was extremely well observed and extremely well acted. And the only other film of Hittman's I've seen is her previous one, Beach Rats, which is about a guy who presents it straight to his sort of typical Brooklynite bro friends, but is on the sly frequenting male sex cam services. And he keeps on saying lines along the lines of, I don't know what I want. And there's a similar line in this film where someone says, I don't know what I want to do right now. And both of these films seem to be about people going through a formative or identity formative experience involving sex to some degree and involving a taboo or a societal restriction around sex. And I'll say that Hittman's style, which is partly because she's working with one of the great cinematographers of the moment. Her name's Hélène Louvart. She shot Happy's Lazaro and a number of other films. The way in which she calmly observes every part of the process, every step of getting not only to New York, but then within these different offices, and then there are these sort of, it's always another obstacle to follow, and the way that she documents this is so clear and sympathetic, and it seems to me that Hittman's films are, or at least the two that I've seen in this one, she's a director who communicates very clearly about people who don't communicate clearly themselves. There's the style of acting here, and Cindy Flanigan's absolutely fantastic. There's a central scene from which the title is drawn, which is absolutely heart-melting. It's extraordinary stuff. What she does is she's so constantly on the verge of tears. You can see the lip is just about to go. There's a little frown just above her eyebrows. And this sort of, I feel like I want to call this performance style recessive, and it connects to a brilliant essay written by Shawnee Enelo in the unfortunately soon to be shuttered film Comment called The Great Recession, and it's about the emergence of a certain style of pared down, internalized acting, and I think this could really be seen as like a not only a textbook example of that, but extremely sophisticated development of it too.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think what isn't said and what's in the eyes of these, particularly these two girls on this journey, and it could very much be as, like, oh, I'm spending 2 days in the city, and and I loved every element of their journey and where they were going, especially because I lived in New York, so I actually know where that arcade is, I think, and it's one of my favorites. But but knowing through that, the way that their acting is so well done, knowing that this main story is is so harrowing and so sad that she's having to go through this. It incredibly blew me away. I was moments I was sad and and horrified, but also moments where I was just loving spending this time with them. So I was so happy to see this film, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I would agree with both of you. I think this is an absolutely superb film. It just captures so many little things very well, and it would be very easy for a film dealing with this sort of topic to be impassioned, in the sense that, a lot of very overt, out there emotions, and it does that far more, in my opinion, far more powerful thing of they are there, you can feel them, but it's all in what is not said. It's not to do with, great angry speeches or, emotional breakdowns. It's all about trying to hold it together, really. Despite the fact that it's, rather than it being kind of like this seismic moment in the main character's life, and there's this huge drama that swirls around it, it's more this kind of like emotional death by 1,000 cuts almost. It's just like all these little difficulties they need to face and absorb and just try and keep going, despite the fact that this entire system seems to be against them. And that resides in the two central acting performances, but also the direction as well. I think one thing, on a slightly more flippant note, one thing it does capture beautifully is the fact that a lot of these public transport terminals in New York are like purgatory. I mean, honestly, like, it just looks like absolute hell on earth. Now, I know that, like, my only real experience of one of them is Penn Station, which is, honest to God, it's like it's just this fluorescent lit hellhole. And I think, and I don't know where it is in the film. I think it's maybe like the bus terminal, like the Port Authority.
They're in
or something.
Port Authority, yeah.
Yeah, right. And basically, it looks very similar in that regard. So it does get that across, like, really very well. And it's just all these little things add up. What is not said, the facial expression here, the fact that where they are just looks just the most unaccommodating, uninviting place in the entire Earth. It all adds to it, and that look that spills over into the clinic offices that Autumn finds herself in. It's just all these elements come together to just tell what is a very simple story very well. It's something I've said about a couple of films on the show, and even today I'll say it about another one. But this one, certainly the ones we're talking about today, this is the best visual storytelling in my view. It's the situations that the characters are put in, the way the story develops, and then the acting. It just all comes together to be absolutely spot on in my view.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there's something too about when they arrive in New York and they go to the subway for the first time. There's that feeling which has been done in a million movies, but it's very particularly articulated here. It's about the whiz and the rush of New York, and it being such a contrast with the more sedate rhythms of Pennsylvania, where she's from. But then you need to connect that to the way in which there's just this pervasive air of enmity and sexism just everywhere she goes. And it's on the tube it's in Pennsylvania, it's in her work. There's a horrible moment cashing up, which is unspeakable. Just to think that that's an everyday thing is appalling. But then there's a moment on the subway, which is even worse, if you can compare them. And what you said, Jim, too, about the storytelling being just the best storytelling that we're going to see in the films reviewed in the show today, is so true, because those moments where she's in the clinic and maybe it's an ultrasound she's going for, maybe it's the first step of the abortion. There's a moment where she looks at a monitor and she can see the image of her baby as it's growing. There's a moment where Lovart's camera just moves from right of the screen to the left as she rolls her eyes away from the screen, and it's like, okay, she's made her mind up. Like that's it. And a similar moment where she's... I'm
pleased you mentioned that, because there's another shot that's kind of like a little bit similar.
Up to the sky.
And it's just like it's like we said, it's little things, but it's just it's allowing the visuals to tell the story, and I think I really think the film does it superbly, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the key examples that actually stuck in my head.
And that thing about like the camera being the sympathetic observer when everyone else belittles her or just takes advantage of her.
Exactly. I mean, I agree, like the whole like you were talking about the subway scene. Even when she went up to the subway guy, like I was gonna tell her, I was like, oh, don't do that, because he's not gonna give you any information. And the way just trying to figure out how to get in and stuff. I mean, in some aspects it's like a travelogue. This is, it's just, New York is a scary place, and even my friend and I were talking 2 nights ago about those things that happen on the subway that you can't imagine they do, but they do, but it's the details and how that she's telling the story that is really, really special.
Mm.
So when is this film out then, Jim? Do you know?
It is out on May 13th, I believe.
Okay, so May 13th, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. We all highly recommend the film.